Hello, welcome to the IMDb Twitch stream for What in the Westworld Just Happened. I'm Ian DeBorja. With me, as always, Kevin McFarland. Kevin, how's it going?
I'm doing well.
All right, so rather than do a full episode recap, Kevin and I were changing the format a little bit, and we're just going to go into what we learned. So here's that. Episode 3, Virtù e Fortuna, pardon my awful Italian accent.
Virtù e Fortuna, Ian.
Virtù e Fortuna, yes. A lot happened. My last note I wrote at the end of the episode was that felt like a season finale. like it was incredibly dense. The story, I mean, they had cliffhangers. Like every other scene was a big cliffhanger. They involved so many of the primary characters. They introduced new stuff. I think it was easily the strongest episode of the season so far. Maybe one of the strongest episodes of the series. I actually might go as far to say, like, that was I was really, really impressed with it. What were your initial thoughts on the episode?
I liked that it was a lot about Bernard and Dolores. Like, I think are the two most interesting host characters.
Yeah.
Well, like, I mean, I like Maeve. I'm just not as invested in her storyline as I am in, like, how abused Bernard has been over the years as a secret host, and Dolores as sort of the leader of the uprising. So I really like that the episode is heavily about the two of them, and like them meeting at this point, and what their relationship is now at having realized what they've realized.
Right, and I really like that they're taking the time where I think Lost stumbled a bit is when they tried featuring 20 characters in every episode. They're doing a good, like, Man in Black wasn't even in this episode, I don't think.
Nope.
And similar, like, Maeve was not in the last one at all.
Yeah,
right?
well, I think it was
scene,
like,
so.
yeah, they're just that crossing paths.
Yeah. So they're doing a really good job of managing, who's going to be the focus of this episode. Even Bernard has barely been in this season other than the first episode also. So just like little bits in here. All right, so what do we learn?
Well, I guess
episode.
Immediately we learn that there's another park. We learn about the existence of, I guess, Raj World.
Yeah, Raj World, I believe is the name.
Which is colonial, like British colonial India. And we sort of, the opening, I guess the Westworld version of a cold open is tracking Grace, a female park, I guess, guest. In Raj World, as she meets another guest, has a romantic tryst, and then embarks on a Bengal tiger hunt, which she's clearly done before.
Right.
But in the middle of that excursion, they realize that the park is going wrong, and she has to flee, and flees from a Bengal tiger, but knows her way around the park well enough that she, like, goes to the boundaries of the park, and so we see that guests can not only get to a boundary, but kind of mistakenly go from park to park. Through those boundaries. Yeah,
and her, so Grace, if you go on her IMDb, if you go on the IMDb page for, let me pull it up quickly. If you go to the IMDb page for her, for the episode, she does not have a last name yet, and obviously the discussion has been, who is Grace? How is she related to the rest of the story? And right off the bat, I felt that she kind of played off as, like, the female version of the Man in Black, right? Like, she is very inquisitive in her thinking. She has that little booklet with some sort of symbol or map that she wants to get to. And then, but the biggest stuff for me is that she was very, very careful to not have any sort of relations with the host. Because she seems like she's pretty aware of, like, the consequences that can come out of that.
Yeah, you don't really see anybody who's cautious about the hosts in that way. I guess, honestly, we haven't really spent that much time with female guests. They've always either been, like, companions of a husband, especially in Westworld. Like, Westworld has always seemed like a place where it's a white straight male fantasy. And so to see a woman guest navigating a different part of the park, it's sort of an interesting glimpse into what it would be like if you were not the white straight male going in, rich straight white male in this fantasy land. So, like, seeing how she interacts differently with her surroundings to make sure that she's interacting with a human when she has a romantic entanglement. Like that was very different from pretty much all of the men we've seen in the park who have almost no hang-ups about interacting with.
And there was something interesting about their interaction too. Is when he sat down at the table with her, a host came over, or who I assume was a host came over and tried pulling him away, and it was like, the governor would like to speak to you, and then the guy says they really don't want us like talking to each other, or something like that, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that it's that the narratives are trying to keep them isolated within hosts. I would assume to preserve the magic of the world, that you want as many human like guests apart from each other as possible, so that like the world can keep them enmeshed in the narrative, instead of like turning to each other and talking like, oh, that narrative.
Sure.
Like you don't get to edit or comment on the narrative if you're not there with another human.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense too. In chat saying the Wild West is generally portrayed as a male-dominated scenario in most of media throughout the ages, with women always playing the love interest. So that's true. That's also a good point. I read a funny comment that said that maybe depending on how intense you want to get into the immersion of the worlds, right? Like in like the colonial Indian world is like the easy level. Westworld is like the medium, and then the Shogun world, which we think we have finally come into, could be the difficult, the hardest difficulty.
Yeah, it is an interesting idea, right? Like if you're going to create so many different worlds, maybe there's like a version where it's like a family-friendly kind of scenario, or something to sort of get you just an introductory narrative kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's what that world kind of seemed like, right? They're having like high tea.
Right.
So I think that could be part of it.
It's slightly more pampered. Like even in the Old West, like if you were rich and stuff in the Old West, it wasn't a glamorous kind of thing.
Right.
But in colonial India, like if you were in the British rule, like you were the aristocracy and were living a really wealthy life. So yeah, that would sort of track that easy, medium, hard. But it makes that glimpse into Shogun world even more interesting. That if it's going to be the difficulty level ramps up. Right. That's an interesting possibility.
Yeah, and also before we move on from this topic, quick call out to the Seven Nation Army cover, because that was so good. Like again, they hit it out of the park. Like, my wife heard like the bass line. She was like, "Oh, that's Seven Nation Army." Like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." And like it sounded like, but then like when the sitar comes in with like the melody line, I was like, "God, that was such a cool cover."
They're doing some really great like soundtrack choices. The music producers or like the music supervisors are doing a great job like selecting and integrating that stuff. Yeah,
so I read an interview with the composer. Do you want? I'm blanking on his name right now, but he actually said that the showrunners basically tell him what songs they want, so they're very, very specific.
Yeah.
And the song was
Jawadi.
Raymond Jawadi. And the song was Seven Nation Army by, that is the White Stripes. That's not Jack Black. That's not Jack White. That's the White Stripes, correct?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
All right. So
other things we learned.
So something that so we found out that Abernathy, and I guess I'm jumping ahead in the story, but this was on like my top two things of how I was interested in. So we have found Abernathy, and we know that Charlotte's character has been running all over the park with Bernard and some other folks trying to find out where Abernathy was for one reason, to get the package out. And something that I noticed, that when they finally find him for the first time, or at some point when they find him, the first time it was seen, he's actually dressed up. He is with other guests and other hosts. He is held by other hosts with other guests. At least that's what it seemed like. And he is dressed like a guest as well, which is very interesting, because I don't think do you remember the last time we actually saw him? So he was it was when Charlotte was like sending him off, where she like implants him with the information to smuggle out of the park, and then is just sort of like, get him out of here. Yeah. Get him on a train and get him out of here as an insurance policy. But then he's just like kind of off in the park somewhere as the hosts have rebelled. And so they capture him presumably with a group of guests. Right. So I think that he actually, and I'm sure we can go back and watch the season finale of the last episode of last season, but I feel like he was dressed up to be as a guest at that party.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And the reason he's glitching, saying I need to get to the train, when Dolores eventually finds him again, she thinks that he wants to go back to Sweetwater, when I believe it's his programming to leave the park.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I guess like within there, I guess we learn Charlotte is alive, and we learn that that Abernathy isn't just like corrupted because he's been programmed with the files to like get out of Westworld with, but because he, like, we've known since the first season that he's just like corrupted because he's been rebuilt and reprogrammed so many times. Like it seems as though his system is just corroded, and you see like on the little, as Bernard is doing his like tinkering with Abernathy, that he's been rebuilt and reprogrammed to be so many different roles. He was once like part of a horror, like sort of seemingly like dinner theater character. And then he was I think he's played a bunch of different roles throughout it, which makes it so much more interesting as to why Dolores is so attached to him.
Yeah, and quick shout out to the actor Lewis Hertham, who when he's doing his glitch out scenes, like, he is so good.
Yeah, and awesome, he's like sweating visibly and like really doing these these physical ticks. It's really really in the same way that Jeffrey Wright does as like or even as Evan Rachel Wood does, that sort of switch between the very calm robot versus emoting human. Like it's very off-putting when they get very good at portraying that.
Yeah. So do you think? So are we still on the train that the guest data and stuff is what they're trying to get out of the park?
I don't know. So like the other, I guess in the level of things we learn Bernard is able to sort of crack the encryption on the file that Charlotte has put into Abernathy and see it, and he like is stunned by it or something. So it's something that even Bernard is like freaked out by, which I think leads to where we get in the trailer for the next episode of where Bernard is going.
Yes. All right. What else do we learn, Kevin?
Wyatt takes over the Confederados. I guess we can start calling Dolores Wyatt or interchangeably, whatever. She's calling herself Wyatt now. Yeah. But she takes over the Confederados at a location known as Fort Forlorn Hope, and which is that is such a funny I guess as a Wild West outpost. Like, would that be like Union soldiers in the West? Is it Confederates after their defeat on the border with Mexico? Like, that's a strange fort name, but kind of appropriate given the mood of the episode. And so it sort of sets up this to me. I have in my notes, this is the Helm's Deep of Westworld. That we get a host versus security, Delos security face-off, where the goal is to draw in as many security forces as possible, and use the Confederados, or at least it's Dolores' plan to use the Confederados as essentially just like a barrier to slaughter everybody and blow up a bunch of like napalm or whatever they've got all over the place. I'm not entirely sure what the goal of that is, other than just to like clear the deck of the security forces so they can't follow them where they're going. Right.
The other thing happening, so a couple that scene obviously is like kind of the climax of the episode, and I guess we can unpack a couple things in there. So, and someone chat said this just right now. The only gripe with the fight is how the Confederados they just easily destroyed the security forces.
Yeah, that seems a little strange, right? Given the weaponry disparity.
It seems a little strange. And so, I mean, the weapons are different. They're coming in armored cars. Yeah. And and obviously for story's sake, if they just went in there with like planes and drones, like it'd be all over. But I feel like they have to explain that at some point as to why that's not going on with that, right?
Yeah. I wonder, like, those cars are sort of like they're like meant to be like tactically quicker, I guess. They're not as enclosed and armored, right? Which does sort of beg the question, like, why aren't they doing things a little more heavily armored? Yeah. And Charlotte is going out into the field too because she's trying to retrieve Abernathy.
Right.
which she does.
Which she does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which sort of triggers the end sequence where Dolores wants to go after her father, but Charlotte has taken him, and Bernard is sort of left for presumably wandering more.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, just adrift again. Yeah,
so
and yeah, we can.
Oh, I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say just on that, like, well, I'll talk about Teddy and then we can go to Bernard. So
Sure.
just that Teddy, the end bit of Teddy there, where he, Dolores, she's, basically telling him to go to kill the rest of the Confederados, and he finally doesn't. Right? He ends up shooting the bullet to the wall. Dolores catches him in kind of like a funny like little like eye roll sort of shot there. But the thing that I thought about that was great is that Teddy, we've known he's been programmed to protect Dolores and B, hate Wyatt, and now she is both one and the same. And I think he might have just realized like what was happening, right? Like I think he might have just realized, and so finally, we were talking about this earlier before we started, that it seems that he's starting to get a character again, because he felt a little unused at the beginning of the season so far. Or, I mean, 3 episodes, but now it seems like he's finally going to get into some conflict with Dolores, right? And there's that line in the first episode of the season where Dolores goes, "It ends with you and me." Right, the story ends with you and me. So I wonder if that's kind of alluding to a Teddy / Wyatt Dolores showdown. Yeah, towards the end of the season.
It's interesting because like she's the one who's like shaking him out of his character or his narrative into consciousness, and then with that newfound consciousness, he then uses it to question her as well. And so like she wants him to snap out and follow her, but that's just another kind of servitude, right? Like to have true independent and, not to quote Kanye, but being a free thinker, that she has to let him make his own decisions, whether or not it conforms to what she wants. And she's trying to be sort of judge, jury, and executioner. Like, not everybody's going to make it to the promised land, to glory, or wherever they're going.
Which she says that like verbatim, right?
To the Confederados. And so I can't remember the guy that she from the Last Supper scene last week, who ends up in that confrontation with Teddy. I don't remember his name. But that is what that conflict is between him and Teddy over, like, you're not your own man. You're getting yourself get ordered around by this woman. And Teddy, at his core, even though he was programmed as like Wyatt's right hand, right, one of the people killing, he does seem to be now kind of a white hat, and that leads him to let all of those people go, which like has them out in Westworld to encounter other people in order to keep bending on the narrative. It seems like those Confederados want vengeance now, and it seems like they could run into somebody who wants to confront Dolores in a vengeful way. And then let's get to Bernard.
So Bernard, a couple things with his episode. So Dolores knows he's a host.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if that had come across before.
Yeah, like we've definitely seen Arnold and Dolores versus Bernard and Dolores. I don't know if I could like pinpoint scenes from the first season which are which. Right. But it definitely has happened. But now that Dolores is conscious, not only can she tell that Bernard isn't Arnold, but she pulls an "I knew Arnold, you are no Arnold." On him. And like, I knew, did you even know the man you were modeled after? Do you know anything about him? And I've been outside the park. You've never been outside the park.
Which does explain a couple things, because when she looks at Bernard and says, put him in like the jail with everyone else, I literally said out loud, man, Dolores, that's pretty cold-blooded. The one guy who was like trying to help you, and it's because she realizes immediately that he is not who he's not Arnold, right? Which is interesting. And then the other thing with Bernard is that he is his interactions with Charlotte. So Charlotte knows for sure he is a host.
Has to. So that's the like, most of this episode takes place within the like time frame between the end of the first season and the beginning of the second season on the beach with Bernard.
Yes.
right? Like
Or
that
so we think.
or so we think, or so we think. Whatever. Like that's what
Yeah.
we're theorizing right now. But
Yes.
the only part that takes place after Bernard wakes up on the beach is him like they go into the tunnel, that train tunnel, see like the carnage in the sublevels, and then find Charlotte, and Charlotte is sort of like, "Oh, hey, Bernard, you made it."
Yeah.
So Charlotte's just like ditching Bernard all over the place.
Yeah, she leaves him for she leaves him for dead. I think this episode might have been the third or fourth time this season that she just like bailed on him completely and just like ran away, and conveniently is not shot by the otherwise sharpshooter hosts.
Yeah, who then we see like the creepy like outlaw rapist guy Bernard fiddles with, and then that's why on the beach in the beginning of the first episode he's like yelling at the soldiers, "You can't shoot a woman." Do you remember that?
I did not even put together.
Yeah, his personality has been so switched to like be so chivalrous and stuff that when he's getting shot on the beach, he's like arguing that you can't shoot a woman, you can't like be violent towards a woman, which is such an incredible level of attention to detail.
Yeah, I definitely did not catch that. Let me see here. Was there anything else big that we? Chat, throw something in there if you think we missed something on here.
Well, then there's the Maeve and Lee and Hector.
That's right.
Yeah, another like great comedy moment from Lee is letting Hector talk about his lost love and then just quoting the lines right to him that Lee wrote for him, which is a great little bit.
Yeah, and it was a funny bit, and it also showed like I'm still kind of in control here. Like, you know, he's like, you guys think you're still moving around, and Maeve even kind of noticed. Maeve kind of gives him the look and like lets him, you know, walk away, that sort of thing. And something else in that scene that I thought was really interesting is that they basically implied that Lee Sizemore implanted part of his personality into Hector's character, right?
Yeah, that he's like the man he always wanted to be.
Right, which is something that, you know, people have been like theorizing about, like, you know, are people based off real people, all that sort of thing, which is kind of interesting there.
Yeah, that Hector and his lost love is Lee and a girl who left him because he was too invested in working at the park, I guess, is kind of what we're meant to draw from that. But I guess the other sort of more thematically potent thing is that Hector and Maeve seem to be genuinely in love with each other. That even if Hector is quoting lines that Lee wrote for him about another character he's supposed to be in love with, that Lee is like yelling at him, "You are programmed to only love this woman," and his response is, "That's not real, but what Maeve and I have, that's real."
Yes.
And that sort of conscious awakening of the robots is the exact thematic territory. Like that's the heart of the show.
Right. And which is good too, because like I like that they're showing it's not just all like everyone's just so violent in their violent delights, right? Are not like becoming sentient doesn't mean they're just gonna go like fight and kill everyone.
It means they get to have meaningful connections.
They have meaningful connections, but I think it's good. So then last two things we found out were those guys, Felix and Sylvester.
Yeah.
Also,
those technicians. Glad they're alive.
Named after two cats. I just realized. I just right.
They got 9 lives, Ian.
Yeah, they got 9 lives. So and then, you know, it ends on. So it's called the Klondike narrative. So, so Lee is leading Maeve to go. They're trying to find her kid. He says they're probably in this Klondike narrative where there is snow. And then we finally come into Shogun World. So do you think that they are at Shogun World, or do you think that?
I would imagine that those parks must border each other. That because in the sub-basements or whatever, the sub-levels or the background, that they border each other, that they walk into Shogun World partly at the end of the first season, that those parks border each other on the surface level as well. And I guess it makes sense that like the West, you know, there's mountains, there's the Rockies, there's like cold plains. Like it would make sense that there's snow in a Western setting, but also, you know, snow in the Japanese mountains. So like that, those landscapes make sense to overlap with each other, or at least border each other in some way. And that, I mean, that scene where Lee pulls out the severed head from the snow and then gets super freaked out is like a really interesting moment, because you normally don't see, like they should be freaked out kind of no matter where they're going, But
Right.
like, is he freaked out because like their weapons are going to be different? Is he freaked out because the difficulty level is different?
Yeah, I mean they were super aggro, right?
Yeah.
That guy came charging at them.
Mhm.
So yeah, and there was also a decapitated samurai head
Yeah.
in the stone too.
And then I guess the thing that I would have as a lingering question is like, are we going to come back to that? Because the trailer for the next episode doesn't really have them in it.
Yeah.
So
they're
we
really
gonna
they're
leave
really
them
teasing
for-
out the
yeah.
fan service the whole time. All right. So then last thing here, and I guess that also just realized, and people are saying this in chat too. Do we think? How do we think? Or I guess we can talk about the next part too. But since we're on it, how do we think the hosts in Raj World got infected and the Shogun hosts, right? So in chat they're saying, maybe that's the first time Sizemore realizes how far the virus has spread.
Yeah.
Right?
That is a good question. Like, because you see Robert like start this in Dolores in Westworld, is it like going on that sort of like host to host communication level and has spread all over the park?
Right.
Is there no security? Like, are the hosts all on one network, like beyond park borders?
Just a forward kill switch, right? Something like that.
Yeah. So like, what is the technology glitch or like purposeful command that led to that breakdown?
So I just thought of this right now. Okay, so we've seen Ford do things, and we already know people can do things without touching a button, right? Like Ford was pulling churches out of the ground with his hands, and like he was like freezing people and moving the big like cranes and all that kind of stuff, right? Like
Sure.
with just like his mind. Okay, so what if when he got shot at the end of season 1, that is what triggered everything? So whenever he dies, it sets off this chain of events of all the violent delights.
I mean, that makes sense, right? That he like programs that in where like once my like God mode control is gone, all control is off.
Okay, so since we're going on this, let's just cut to theories and we'll end on the highlights. So we'll go to theories right now.
For sure.
All right, so theories. What are your favorite theories?
Well, I mean, the Grace stuff I think is really interesting, like whether or not she is William's daughter, Emily. That family connection seems really like interesting to build in there because of how much William has sort of built up how bad his relationship had gotten with his wife and daughter. And it would sort of make sense that if she was so knowledgeable about the park and in a different world, but still knew the like back area and how to like that she could swim across a lake and get into Westworld. Like, I'm very curious for what's going to happen to her now that Ghost Nation seems to have taken her. And like they wanted to take Lee when Hector and Maeve and Lee crossed their path, but like what does Ghost Nation need a guest for? And what's her path now that she's in Westworld? Who's she going to cross paths with, and what more do we have to know about her? I think it would be really interesting to see if she is William's daughter, what his reaction to finding her would be.
Right, and so yes, I think that is definitely William's daughter, or at least related to William in somehow, right?
She has more knowledge than
Yes.
than the average park goer.
But on the Ghost Nation stuff, I actually saw this on Reddit, I think a couple times. I think a couple people posted this. So the theory is that Ghost Nation is actually trying to save guests. So there are a couple instances where Ghost Nation people run into guests but leave them alive, right? So at the end of season 1, they actually walk right past the Man in Black. Is that right? The Ghost Nation walks right past them, and there's another character at some point who gets we assumed was dead, but actually was survived, and that can also potentially explain how what's his name?
Isn't it the other Hemsworth?
Yes, one of the Hemsworth.
Yeah. How is he? How we haven't really found out how he's alive. So that
So and he was left with the Ghost Nation people, and that's why they're saying you can go, but we want him. And maybe they're not supposed to break character enough to do that, but I feel like that is going to be a thing where that is their that their purpose is to try and save guests, because they know, like, all the hosts, I guess, up until Dolores, basically, they all fear Ghost Nation, right? Like, no one will really fight Ghost Nation. Dolores, we've only seen her just, like, going ham on that horse in the first episode with that shotgun, just shooting Ghost Nation, like, all over the place. But none of the hosts in the first season want to go even near Ghost Nation, right? Because they're probably know that they're going to die. And that could be, like, the save command, right? That these Ghost Nation who can, like, kill all the hosts or had previously been able to, or can, like, save a guest in this time, if they really need it.
Yeah.
I think I think that was I'm pretty onto. Another thing I'm curious about, and I had here, so they talk about it was just in passing. Someone said something about do you want to get to the cradle? Do you remember that line?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So the cradle, obviously, I just immediately thought like cradle of life, and so I feel like that has to do with the weapon of some sort that they're all trying to get to as well. I'm not really sure. It was just in passing really quickly, but I think that's a interesting thing that they might allude to, because it sounded like they said the cradle, like proper noun, capital T, capital C.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, there's some, I think like in the like alt reality game or whatever, like people are getting emails from Delos and stuff. They're talking about the cradle is in some of that material where it says learn about the simulation technology that stores and tests all of our storylines. The cradle, Delos' time capsule that ensures you get the immersive and dynamic experience you deserve. So that could be like, if that's a storage facility of a lot of Delos information, that could be where they're going.
Yeah, maybe. Mayor Playing in chat says, actually, what if the scene that Maeve keeps flashing back to of Ghost Nation hurting her, Ghost Nation actually isn't hurting her?
They're trying to save.
They're trying to save her, right? Or trying to save the kid or something. That could be interesting too, right? Like there could have been a human, there could be a guest in the scene at the same time, and she was, they could be saying I like that one. That's good. I didn't think of that.
So apparently you can ask questions of like a Delos. You can there's like a chat bot where is I gotta find this, but I'm seeing like there's been a bunch of stuff of people like asking questions about Westworld, and they like are asking stuff about Ghost Nation. One of the answers is Ghost Nation territory is only recommended for expert game players. Their storylines intersect with some of the most thrilling in the park, but they're also the most difficult to access. Trust and respect are the keys to their inner circle. So you can try out and ask questions of the Delos chatbot to try and.
Okay, let's see. So I pulled up the chatbot on the stream actually. How can I find it? Connect to this email. No. Explore. But there's the updated map.
Oh, interesting.
Check availability.
You get to book your trip. All right.
Yeah. Do you have like $20,000 you want to send my way?
Yeah, right. 20,000. Isn't it like 10,000 a day?
Yeah. I'm not funny. I'll dig around this. We'll
talk about that.
Try to pick it up for the next time.
Other theories. I think the one thing that like I thought was floating around is that James Delos is actually Peter Abernathy.
Yes.
I don't think this episode really supports that.
Yeah.
It seems like what he's got going on is just that he's been glitching so hard from all of the stuff that's happened to him. Not that he's got human memories or a human consciousness planted into him.
Yeah.
And I guess the one thing that we didn't really delve into is the connection that Dolores has with Abernathy still, that he has that moment of realization of who she is, and it's like this 2-minute realization and like talking on his narrative from back on the ranch, and then he just glitches back into like being incomprehensible, and it's really like it's touching that she has such a connection to him, but also like indicative of her consciousness and her like the human element in there, that because she cares about this character who is not her father, only played her father, and has so many iterations of consciousness in him that it's causing him like huge problems, that it causes her to make like some glaring bad decisions in that battle at the fort. And she goes after Abernathy. She's shooting at the Delos employees to try and get him from Charlotte, and basically takes Teddy and says, we're going back to Sweetwater presumably to go to the train in Sweetwater or something.
Right.
It's something she needs there related to her father, but that's kind of a distraction from her main goal. And she
Right.
doesn't even know that like Abernathy she didn't care enough to stick around and talk to Bernard and figure out like what's on that file. What
Yeah.
did they implant in her father? Can you just get it off him and
Right.
store him? She's just like, no, I physically want the body that is my attachment to my father.
Right. And I feel like Charlotte might know, right? Charlotte seems very aware of everything that seems to be happening in the park.
Yeah.
And she actually did say in the first episode of the season, she said like, it doesn't matter who dies as long as we get it out. So she could have just sent those guys in knowing that they were going to die anyway. Cause she got that backdoor entrance pretty like, why didn't they just come from the back? Like they were in the back, right? They got around like really easily.
Yeah.
So
the other thing now that you mention it, so you know how Charlotte hooks up with Hector in the first season?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why, knowing everything that Charlotte knows about Delos and collecting genetic material, is Charlotte hooking up with a host?
Well, maybe she was testing to see how accurate it was or something.
I guess, but like that seems a little strange if like she knows how creepily all that stuff is getting tagged and sampled. Why she'd be risking that, or unless she knows how to flush the system.
Right, or she's in control of it.
Yeah.
Someone in chat wants to know, are you familiar with Paradise Lost, John Milton's?
Somewhat.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I've read it, but like in college. So
yeah, okay. I read parts of it in college. If it's an allegory, Westworld's an allegory for Paradise Lost. I need to brush up on that before I can make a confirmed statement on that one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, like I can see how that would be possible. That's very complex of an allegory there though. And we don't really have an equivalent Satan figure.
Right.
It's sort of spread out amongst a bunch of different characters.
Yeah. All right. So let's just go into our highlights of the episode, shall we?
Sure.
All right. All right. So, what were your favorite moments?
I think like against my typical ranking, like I've said, Maeve's storyline isn't my favorite, but for whatever reason, I find like her interactions with Lee like my favorite moments in episodes. So like I really would stick out that at that point where Lee kind of shows that he has a little more authority than they think. Mm-hmm. That even though they're in control of the situation, he still knows them better than they think they do, and they're not entirely independent. So that line when he starts reciting Hector's dialogue to him, and that subsequent conversation with Maeve about his ex-girlfriend, that was probably my favorite moment there.
So mine is easy to say, probably just the whole opening sequence. That was when that opening sequence happened. When it ended, I actually hit pause. I think I went to go to the bathroom really quickly, and that was 12 minutes. That was like the fastest 12 minutes of my life. I was like, man, that could have been like, I mean, they set up the world instantly. The music choices, they even had like the classical Indian version of the theme song too, right?
Yeah, right.
Which I thought was so cool. They did that. They established a new compelling character, very compelling character. They introduced a couple, they explained the tiger and basically were just like, yeah, like it's here. That's it. Like it's interesting, but it's because it knocked her off of, they kind of toss that in there in the trailer to get people really excited, and then it was like that was like basically a red herring of a clue, kind of, right?
Yeah, it's more about the person that gets in there and the tiger is following more so than like the tiger's wandering.
Right. Yeah, the tiger just happened to just like jump too far over.
Although there is that sort of security thing where the tiger walks through that little laser guide.
Walked right through it. Yeah.
And like, okay, so our security barriers are really all failing all over the place.
Yeah.
Great.
Another one line of mine I liked a lot is when we finally got to see what is her character's name? Clementine. No, not Clementine. We did get to see Clementine. We got to see
her out of Cold
Armistice.
Storage.
We got to see Armistice finally with that flamethrower, and Hector goes, she has a dragon.
that was really cool. And then she's just sort of like, hey guys, what's up? Like, I'm back.
Yeah, I thought that was maybe a little hat tip to Game of Thrones there a little bit, right? I thought that was very cool.
Yeah.
Another standout moment for me. I'll look at my notes here. Yeah, I think the Peter, all of Peter Abernathy's scenes, he's just such a standout actor. Like, he is so good, and we talked about it earlier before. Like, and he is obviously such a key character in this whole storyline, and he's not in it that often. But when he's in it, he's like, even from the first episode, he's just like, he's kind of an overall just such a strong character there.
Yeah. And then I guess my other favorite moment would be the Bernard Dolores conversation, where like they've come so far from their points of view, even like at the end of last season. Like, they've just seen so much more and are like coping with such different goals. Like, Bernard doesn't. What is Bernard's goal at that point in the story? Is he just trying to keep everything together? Is he trying to be an asset to Dolores? Like, he's now hacked into Abernathy and taken out the file and has seen what Delos's plans are. So he has a unique perspective and unique authority and a unique ability to blend in order to accomplish whatever those goals are. So it's kind of unclear why people don't want Bernard as their ally. They keep leaving Bernard everywhere, even though you kind of want Bernard on your team. Right.
Cool. All right. So how do you rank this guy before we go into the next preview?
I think I give it an 8. It's definitely my favorite episode of the season so far. Yeah. And like you said, like, I think it's a very strong episode, like, overall. Like, I would rank it like higher than most episodes of the first season, I would say.
Yep.
I like that we're seeing a wider picture, that it's not so tied into like Westworld. It's more about Delos now than it is about like Westworld as the one park.
Yeah.
And I like that conflict there, the human versus the hosts, and we're rooting for the hosts to figure out and find some sort of victory and satisfaction. I like that setup.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I would say I'm going to give that a 9 on mine also. I think, easily the strongest episode of the season, which is saying something because I think the season has been very strong so far. And like I said, I think stronger in the series as a whole. Again, I felt like that honestly felt like a season finale level of intensity and stuff like that. So
there's a lot going on.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the clips, the preview for next week.
Oh, sure.
Let me hold on. I block that. All right. Pull it up. All right. So we're getting the first shots. Looks like we get Bernard again in that other timeline in the past, right? A little behind where he's talking. You see those scary drone guys walking around. Right? Is that the right one? Yeah. And also the episode is called Riddle of the Sphinx, which is interesting because are we going to get another world? Are we going to get Egypt world? Right?
Or is it about the drone hosts, and you can't the faceless drone hosts you can't see? What is the material that they're playing around with there?
I know, yeah. So let's see. So where is it? So at 10 seconds, are those a bunch of eyeballs?
Yeah.
They're kind of stacking there, right?
Yeah, they look like weird little cupcakes, but those are not.
I thought they were cupcakes too, like they're doing a birthday party or something. But that's very far from it, obviously. I don't know what those are. All right, so drones just throwing more, and look, so they're revolting against people who are working in the facility, which we did not see last time, correct?
Yeah.
Which is interesting as well, and who are controlling them. Here we get to see Men in Black again.
And then there's sort of little chapel there where the Confederados have like met them.
Yep.
It seems clear Men in Black is going to link up with the Confederados.
Yeah. At 21 seconds, it's the pretty gnarly imagery of people getting placed into the train tracks, which is pretty intense, obviously. Either
host or guests being used as railroad ties.
Right.
That's
one of them.
Definitely creepy.
Yeah. And then more Men in Black. So, and who is this woman giving him a shot of alcohol, or what we're led to believe is alcohol?
Rain. Yeah, what's going on there? Because then let's see, what's Clifton Collins Jr.'s name? We were trying to
on the ground.
Yeah, because he's there on the ground. And it's sort of unclear. Like, is Men in Black going to move on from one guide to another with the Confederado guy, or like what is the deference here in him taking the shot of booze?
Yeah,
I don't really know what's going on there, but.
Yeah, it could be like a Coco scenario.
Yeah.
Where that can represent something there. Anyway, so that it was only a 30-second spot, so obviously they didn't give us much more. It's a little less than what we've been used to the last couple episodes, but it seems that we're getting more Men in Black stuff. Pretty excited for
Holding
it.
our cards a little tighter to the chest.
All right, so any last words?
I think I'm curious as to how much we are going to see of the other parks, because we thought we were going fully into Shogun World, and we've gotten like glimpses into it, and I'm sort of curious whether it's Shogun World moving into that Klondike area in Westworld, or whether they're fully going into it, and whether we're going to go back to the Raj or whatever it is. Like how much of it is going to take place in those other zones versus how much are the other zones going to invade Westworld? I think that's what I'm curious about now.
Right. Yeah, I'm just curious to see what is the fate, I guess, of the Man in Black. He seems to have been in a dire situation.
Yeah.
And if he's going toward that fort, I don't know what he's going to see there.
Yeah, and talking about glory.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of talk where it's like that isn't. You talk about that word, you don't know where that is, or you don't know what that is. I know what it is, and like we gotta arrive at some destinations at some point to talk about.
And I just thought about, like, in that clip, it had a character walking up to a picture of the crucifixion of Jesus, and I wonder if the Man in Black sees himself as like a martyr, he has to die for Westworld or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of there's the Last Supper allegory.
We have seen a good amount of biblical like symbolism going on. This season,
you were the gods, etc. So cool. Anyway, all right, Kevin, where can the fine folks on YouTube and Twitch find you?
Sure, you can find me on Twitter at @KM_McFarland, McFarland. It's the best place to reach me.
Awesome. Good episode again. We'll be back here next Monday, 2 p.m. Pacific, talk about what I'm sure will be another wild episode. Otherwise, I will be back here Wednesday at 12 noon to talk. We're talking about Vertigo and Alfred Hitchcock, actually, Kevin, which I know you are a big fan of both of those.
Very nice. Good stuff.
So, it's a movie anniversary of Vertigo. I forget what number it is, but we'll be talking a little bit about that.
Very nice.
Anyway, everyone else, I'm Ian. That's Kevin. Thanks for watching What in the Westworld Just Happened, and we will see you guys next week.